Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, beautiful origami people joining from so many different places of the planet. So as I promised you, here we are going to have a conversation with a person I am very excited about, Madona Yoder. She's here with us today. I had the opportunity to meet her in person last February at the conference or convention for creators in Bogota, Colombia, and we had some great conversations. And here, before we started, I learned a little bit more about her enthusiasm for other activities other than origami. So, Madonna, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you for the invitation, Leyla. I'm excited to have this conversation.
That's wonderful. So a little bit more of your background. Madonna is an origami artist who has focused on tessellation since 2018. And since then, she has created more than or about 400 designs, tessellation designs. In 2020, Madonna opened her website business, Gathering Falls, where she offers instructions on how to create tessellations. Madonna has many other creative interests, and we will have the opportunity today to ask her about those interests as well. So thank you, Madonna, for being with us here today. Tell us a little bit about your education and background. What did you study and what's your background other than origami, of course?
Sure. So when I was in high school, I took a lot of math and science classes at a magnet school that was separate from my high school that I went to half a day for the last 2 years of high school. And when I was there, I did a math competition and won a modular origami book.
Oh.
And that set me off on modulars while I was at MIT to study geology. So I have a bachelor's in geology from MIT. And what happened was that my final semester there, I took a class with Eric Demain, the professor of origami at MIT, on geometric folding algorithms. Mm-hmm. And that's actually what got me into tessellations. That class and folding a bunch of triangle grids for that class, and then doing a internship in Israel where, I mean, I had been folding modulars. I wasn't going to bring back a suitcase full of modulars. So with the same amount of time and effort, you can make a folder full of tessellations. So I switched to tessellations, taught myself through videos on the internet. And so that the education and the origami are very much entwined.
Oh, wonderful. That's great to hear. And so when you were given this book as a prize for winning, had you been introduced to origami before, or that was your introduction to origami?
Yeah, I'd been folding origami for maybe 5 to 8 years before that. Okay. And mostly small things to just keep myself occupied during a church service or any other time when I was sitting still. I started with the crane that flaps its wings when I was in 4th grade, and added more things to my repertoire. One year I got 2 fold-a-day calendars for Christmas. And so I learned like Robert Lang's parrot, although I wouldn't have been able to tell you at the time who designed any of these things, because it was not something I was aware of, that people were actively creating new origami designs.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. It's something that we get to know as we get into the practice and meet other people, and people are always referencing the designers, and that's wonderful because we then have a way to know where the procedence of the figures. But yeah, I totally relate to the fact that at the beginning it's just enthusiasm, and we don't know where they come from or how important it is to mention the designers. But here we are. highlighting one of the designers today. So that's a wonderful opportunity. So you got inspired to get into the tessellations because that course that you that you took. Then you went on to teach yourself a little bit more. And can you describe a little bit about what was one of your first designs and what have been your challenges and your frustration and how you overcame it?
Yeah, so when I first started designing, I was thinking about like, okay, there's these patterns that I know, and I'm starting to understand like, okay, a hexagon goes into a triangle and then goes back into a hexagon. And so you have this alternation where the hexagon has 6 triangle neighbors, the triangle has 3 hexagon neighbors. And then I started thinking about, what if I use different things for the hexagon? What if I use different things for the triangle? And my first designs were really trying to push the twist difficulty angle, trying to find different twists to put in these positions. But what I didn't realize at that point is there's a whole other dimension, which is structural complexity. And so you can use the simplest twists in different structures to create new designs. You can use those simplest twists in the same structures with different styles of placing them in there. So instead of alternating one hexagon and one triangle, you can have a hexagon, a triangle, and then pick another hexagon and have a new pattern that way, all without the difficulties that come with using weird twists really close together, needing to pre-crease the whole thing and somehow get it to all collapse in the end.
Right. Okay, I love to ask you, and I think that I got a little earlier before I wanted to ask you some more questions, but I'm going to continue in this path so that we have a thread, and then I will ask you about a little bit more about your other interests. So when you are math oriented and you took that class of geometric folding algorithms, and one of the things that people sometimes question is, do I have to be good at math in order to start doing these tessellations? Do I have to understand all these complicated algorithms? No, when you mention the word algorithms, some of us go like, like freeze because of the fear of math. So tell us about that part. How much math goes into this?
So starting with the algorithms class, even in that class, I was going in without taking any of the prerequisites. So that was a graduate level computer science class, and I had no algorithm experience. But what Eric Domain made possible is he had different options for the homework. One option was take this crease pattern and see if you can fold it and assign the mountains and valleys to fold something. Another problem was prove that this origami problem is the same as like some classic algorithm problem, so you can say something about how hard it is. Well, I chose the crease pattern and it folded into a cute cat, and it was so much fun. And there's a lot of implicit things that you need to know to fold tessellations. So you need to be able to recognize when something is symmetric, recognize how it's symmetric. And that's really the math that's needed to fold the tessellation. To fold a grid, you need a little bit more math, but it's knowing things like 24 is 3 times 8. And like 7 minus 4 is 3. These are the kinds of things that you need to know to fold a grid.
Okay, that should be fairly easy. So can you share a little bit about your tessellation making process? What basic principles? Because one of the things that you say in your website is the tessellations are learnable and very doable. So tell us a little bit about your process.
Yeah, so I actually have a really nice graphic on this topic that I can bring up. And let me go to a different view where we can see first for what a tessellation is made of. We've got certain positions, and then there's the relationships between the positions. So symmetry relationships, what things are connected by pleats. Then we have the contents of those positions. So what specific twists you're choosing to use. And then the spacing, how far apart they are. And if you know what your positions are, what kinds of shapes you're using, how they're connected together, how the symmetries are, what you're putting in each of these shapes, and what spacing you have between them, that is a design. That is what you can learn from a crease pattern. And then for the folding side of things, we have a pretty straightforward process. So for folding a tessellation, you fold a grid, and then you fold a twist on that grid. So this is no pre-creasing, just directly fold the twist. When you squash it, it'll make some new creases in most cases. And then you keep folding twists until you have pleats that are running into each other. And then I call that a pleat overlap. You go and you resolve that pleat overlap, and that brings you back to fold more twists. And you cycle through that loop until you're done. And I like to contrast that with how to collapse a pre-crease tessellation, which is you fold a grid, you pre-crease everything, a miracle occurs, and then you have a finished tessellation. That is much less manageable and teachable than folding a twist at a time.
So in addition to using paper as a material to create tessellations, you have used fabric. Can you share with us a little bit about using fabric and this idea of smoking? I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, which is an embroidery technique used to gather fabric. So if you have, we see it there. It's beautiful. My God. So tell us a little bit about that.
So when so after I finished Eric Demain's geometric folding algorithms class, I ended up with Eric and one of the TAs, Jason Koo, writing up a paper and presenting a poster at the 7th convention/conference for origami in science, math, and education, or OSME. And at that conference, I learned from Adrian Sack how to do this smocking technique and how you can create many of the same patterns that we fold in paper tessellations by sewing certain points together on the back. So none of this is actually folded. It's all about marking certain points on the backside and sewing them together.
Wow. I was
so it's
wondering,
faster than folding.
No kidding. Yeah, I was wondering because I have tried doing something with fabric and origami, but folding regular figures for which I stiffen the fabric, but I didn't see any stiffener here. The lovely nature of fabric, of soft fabric, is there present. You didn't stiffen anything, so I was wondering. I had never had any experience with that.
Yeah, and so the Shadow Folds book from Chris Palmer is the main way that origami people know about this technique. And in there, he uses usually cotton. He's careful to cut the thread between knots, and he's ironing things at the end. He's backlighting things afterwards. What I chose to do with it is make it fluffy and flexible, and use it as a surface to create other things. So this one is a Christmas stocking that I made.
Yeah. What are the best fabrics for doing these tessellations with this material?
So there's pluses and minuses to pretty much any fabric, and the best fabric is going to depend on your use. So for something like the stocking, I use a stretch satin, and that really gives the flexibility, although I am putting backing on it to stabilize it. But if you have a bunch of stuff inside of the stocking, then it can press out on the design, and still everything stays in place and is fine. And that's one of the reasons why I make these test swatches, to make sure that everything is going to be fine before I do several hours of stitching on a main piece. And then I've also done some in fleece. Let me see if I can pull up the photos. I'll switch over once I find them, for a quilt that I made for my niece. So this quilt I did kind of as so I intended it as a quilt that you can lay under, but it turned out to be so heavy because of the compaction of the fabric that it's a playmat. And so it's got all these different textures. It's got twists, it's got weaves, it's got these other structures, and just having all of those, I feel is really going to set her up for a lifetime of mathematical exploration.
That's excellent. So we can see from all this conversation with you, it's been so wonderful. As David says, you're an excellent speaker, wonderfully articulated. So we want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been just a pleasure. And I want to invite everybody to visit your website, gatheringfolds.com, right? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a fabulous conversation, and I'm looking forward to helping even more people learn to fold origami tessellations.
Excellent. Thank you for all your work.